Mr. President, there was a time, and it really wasn't all that long ago, when securing the border had bipartisan support. It was actually a bipartisan goal. I think that made a lot of sense, but it's not now. And it wasn't all that long ago. In 2006, Congress passed something called the Secure Fence Act of 2006. What that piece of legislation did is it authorized 700 miles of what was supposed to be double-layer fencing. Now, in the end, only 36 miles of actual double-layer fencing was constructed. Another 613 miles, consisting of about 299 miles of vehicle fencing. In other words, people could just walk right through it. And another 314 miles of single-layer pedestrian barrier fencing was actually built. I think we've seen that, unfortunately, that fencing did not fulfill the requirements of the Secure Fence of 2006, and it also didn't work. Now, what's interesting to know about the passage of the Secure Fence Act is it passed overwhelmingly in this chamber by a vote of 80 to 19. 26 Democrat senators joined the 54 Republicans voting yes. It also passed the House in a pretty overwhelming margin as well, 283 to 138, with 64 Democrats joining Republicans. So in total, the total count in Congress was 363 votes to build a fence and secure the border versus 157 people that apparently didn't have an interest. In other words, 70% of members of Congress voting on the Secure Fence Act, voting for border security, voted yes. And again, that was with the support of 90 Democrats. By the way, some pretty notable Democrats voted to secure the border by building 700 miles of double-layer fence, including those who were current President Biden, former President Barack Obama, current Majority Leader of the Senate, Senator Schumer, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, my chairman and ranking member of Homeland Security, Senator Tom Carper, the chairwoman of Judiciary in the past, Senator Feinstein, the current chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Wyden. At the time, Senator from Ohio, Senator Brown, was a member of the House, and he voted for it in the House. So again, that's only 14, 15 years ago when securing the border was actually a bipartisan goal. What happened? Why isn't that the case now? Why has securing the border become a partisan issue? Well, politics happened. I wasn't here between 2006 and 2011, but I know there are multiple good faith efforts to pass an immigration bill. They often refer to it as comprehensive immigration reform. I remember when I got here, that effort was still going on, and we actually passed this body a comprehensive immigration bill. I remember talking to Senator McCain, who is one of the leading proponents, and I did suggest that I would stop using the word comprehensive. I don't think we do a very good job of things comprehensively here. We ought to take a step-by-step approach. Senator McCain was not real happy with my comment there, but I made it anyway. I still think, quite honestly, the test of time has probably proven me right. Bipartisanship pretty well ended the efforts when that effort failed in the House. Didn't move it any further. We had to split chamber. And so the Obama administration got impatient. And I understand the frustration. I certainly want to fix the problem. I want to take care of now probably adults that came here as children through no fault of their own, the Daca kids. I think most members of the chamber want to do that. But you have to do it a legal way. And you have to do it a step-by-step approach, starting with securing our border. And I'll talk about that a little bit further, but let me just talk about what the effect of deferred action on childhood arrivals had. It's pretty obvious by this chart. You can see this goes back to 2007, and the red bar is just talking about unaccompanied children apprehended at the southwest border. You can see through 2011, At most, we had a little over 4,000 unaccompanied children coming across the border illegally and being apprehended, and then, obviously, America, we have to take care of them because we're compassionate. In June of 2012, the Obama administration issued the Daca Memorandum. The result was almost immediate. It was a magnet. It was a pull factor. It was used by the coyotes in Central America, so they would tell people that want to come into America, and let's face it, who wouldn't want to be in America? I'm highly sympathetic with people who want to come to America, take advantage of this land of opportunities. But the coyotes would tell the migrants down in Central America, they've changed their laws. Come with us. We'll take you up to the border. We'll get you across the border, and then you'll get a slip. They'll call it a permiso, which is really a notice to appear. And so they came. They came in such quantities that in 2014, more than 51,000 unaccompanied children flooded our border, and President Obama rightly declared that a humanitarian crisis, and it was. That humanitarian crisis at that point in time entailed about 2,000 people coming and being apprehended at the border, 2,000. You can see the result. There were some ups and downs. Quite honestly, what ended up happening is the Obama administration started to detain families, for example. They put in a consequence. And so it actually had an impact. I can show this a little bit better in this chart, which really does show cause and effect. This chart picks up in 2012 with the passage of DACA. You can see President Obama in 2014 declared a humanitarian crisis. That's, by the way, when they built that McAllen facility that we went down as bipartisan members of the Senate and sung CBP's praises for trying to deal with this crisis in such a humane fashion. 4 or 5 years later, same facility, same conditions, a bigger crisis, but now that facility is being referred to as keeping kids in cages. But you can see what ended up happening here. President Obama actually had a family detention policy, kept the families together. But then a court reinterpreted the Flores decision and interpreted unaccompanied children, the Flores decision in terms of how you treated children, how you had to hand them over to HHS in a short period of time. Also, they applied that to accompanied children. So now the tough decision had to be made. Do we actually separate the children so they can be handed over to HHS while we retain the parents who came in here illegally? The decision the Obama administration made, and I really can't blame them, is they kept the families together, but what I blame them for is they dispersed them into America. Most of them never to have an immigration hearing, and when you don't have a hearing, you can't have your asylum claim adjudicated properly, and we know that a very high percentage of asylum seekers here do not qualify for asylum. Even as generous as our policies are, they still don't qualify. But if the claim's never adjudicated, people come in here and they stay. And then they communicate with other people in Central America, and it feeds upon itself. It takes a while, it takes a few years. It took until 2018, 2019 that the word really got out that even though Donald Trump was elected president, he was dedicated to securing the border, and we're going to fix this problem, because you could tell immigration really dropped off following his election. People really felt that he was serious about it, and by the way, he was, but he had no cooperation either by Congress or the courts of enforcing our laws and securing our borders. So word got out over a couple of years, and we had an explosion of illegal immigration, primarily fueled this time by families. Now, President Trump, again, with no help from Congress, no help from the courts, fixed the problem. You may agree or disagree with the Migrant Protection Protocol program, otherwise known as Return to Mexico, but it was a consequence. And because of that consequence, combined with the fact that we also did agreements with Mexico and Central America, people stopped coming. We pretty well stopped the flow and reduced dramatically the flow of unaccompanied children and family members coming to the border. And we pretty well had this problem solved before COVID hit. Throw on COVID in the invocation of Title 42, And we really had this problem solved until the presidential debates, and you had every Democrat presidential nominee or candidate say they were going to stop deportations and offer free health care. And you can see the number of adults. And by the way, the color chart here is gold is single adults, blue is family units, red is children. And so we have this enormous crisis, first of all, surging, beginning with single adults. And then, of course, the first day of office, President Biden dismantled the migrant protection program. He ended those agreements. He made good on his promise to end deportations until the court said you can't do that. But the word was out. The crisis came back with a vengeance. So the last 2 months, there have been almost on an average basis, daily, almost 6,000 people per day being apprehended at the border. This crisis is out of control, but this crisis is also man-made. It's a man-made crisis by President Biden's policies. Now, last week we had a hearing with the Secretary Mayorkas, Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. It was actually surreal. First of all, they blamed this on President Trump. He said this was an inherited crisis. No, it wasn't. It was the Democrat presidential candidates that started the spike of single adults. It was President Obama's dismantling of President Trump's successful policies that sparked and was the catalyst for the renewed crisis of family units and unaccompanied children coming here illegally to exploit our very generous asylum laws. So it was surreal to listen to the Secretary and, quite honestly, the chairman of our committee talking about that this was an inherited crisis, but that things were improving. Well, the only reason they could claim things were improving is, and Secretary Mayorkas said this repeatedly, they're getting more efficient. We're getting more efficient. Not at solving the problem, at processing and dispersing the illegal immigrants coming to this country, which guess what that's going to do? It's just going to cause more to come. This crisis isn't going to end anytime soon until we return to having consequences. And we actually have the goal of reducing or stopping the flow. And that's not happening right now. I was disappointed. Under my chairmanship, we almost always had second rounds of questions, but we were denied that. I'm sure there was time constraints. But in a second round of questions, this is what I wanted to ask Secretary Mayorkas. I wanted to ask him whether he was aware that human traffickers sell children to adults so they can exploit our asylum laws by posing as a family unit. Understand, these policies that are being instituted to be more humane do the exact opposite. It leads to all kinds of human depredations, all kinds of inhumanity. I knew it full well. We held hearings on this in 2018. Vice President Harris had to know as well. She's on my committee. So I wanted to ask Secretary Mayorkas whether he was aware that we heard testimony during my chairmanship that a child was sold for $84. I wanted to ask him, is he aware that children are recycled, that they're sent back over the border to be used by another adult to pose as a family unit and exploit our asylum laws? I wanted to ask, are they verifying that a child actually belongs to an adult? Are they doing DNA tests? If so, what is the percentage those are actual family units? I wanted to know, was he aware of the fact that human traffickers throw children out of rafts when they're interdicted by law enforcement? I don't have the picture here. I honestly wouldn't even want to show it. I showed it in our committee hearing 3 or 4 years ago. It was hard enough showing at that point in time, but it was a father and his 2-year-old daughter who drowned in the Rio Grande. I went down to the border with 18 of my Republican Senate colleagues. We saw a dead body floating in the Rio Grande. The day after, a 9-year-old girl drowned in the Rio Grande. I wanted to know whether Secretary Mayorkas, whether President Biden, whether Vice President Harris was aware of this. I want to know whether the Secretary was aware of the fact that migrant girls are given birth control because they know that such a large percentage will be raped during the dangerous journey when they're put in the hands of these human traffickers. I wanted to know whether the Secretary is aware of the kidnappings and the beatings, the abuse, the additional ransoms demanded by human traffickers. I want to know whether he knows how much the human traffickers charge for their human prey and whether he is knowledgeable about how that debt is paid off. You realize the border is almost 100% secure on the Mexican side of the border. Nobody crosses into America without either paying the human traffickers or being indebted to them. And I wanted to know whether the Secretary knew how they pay those debts off. I want to know whether he knew how many young girls are forced into the sex trade and how many young men are forced into involuntary servitude, used to traffic drugs, or become part of gangs. I wanted to know whether the Secretary, I'd like to know whether the chairman of our committee is aware of the fact that President Biden's policies created this crisis, and they are facilitating the multi-billion-dollar business model of probably some of the most evil people on the planet. I wanted to know. But I didn't get a chance to ask those questions. What's beyond the human toll, beyond the human tragedy, from a standpoint of legislation, what is the real tragedy is that we were so close to taking that first step, that necessary step of making America confident that we are taking border security seriously, that we will secure our border. Because until we do that, we really can't move on. Without creating greater incentives, we can't move on to fix the problem with DACA. We can't set up a legal immigration system that works best for everyone. You know, it's not good for Central America. I've been there. I've talked to their presidents. They ask us to fix our laws. It's not good that their countries are being depleted of the people that they need to rebuild their economies. It's not good for them. It's not good for us. It's certainly not good for the migrants who are put in the hands, again, of the most evil people on the planet and left to their tender mercies. So we're so close. President Trump had stopped the flow, largely, of unaccompanied children, of family units, and he was doing the final step, which was complete the wall. Walls work. Take a look at what happened here after January 6th. Double layers of fencing, concertina wire tipped. We obviously thought they worked here for us in Congress. They will work at the border as well. So what my amendment would do is simply complete the wall that President Trump started. He wanted to build 800 miles. He built 450. 250 miles of that wall has already been contracted for. It will be paid for whether it is built or not. About 100 miles wasn't contracted. So American taxpayer, you need to understand this. You will be on the hook for a couple $1 billion, tens of thousands of tons of steel that's already been produced, all that waste. And we won't even get the 250 miles of wall. Isn't that absurd? Isn't that ridiculous? All because securing the border has become a partisan issue when it was not a partisan issue in 2006. So, Mr. President, my amendment, Amendment 1518, is really pretty simple. Just 2 pages. It's very common sense. It just says, complete the wall that we've already contracted for, that we're going to have to pay for whether we build it or not. Now, in a rational Senate, in reasonable times, this ought to pass 100-0. I fear this is going to be decided strictly on party lines, and that's a real shame. If there's one thing that we ought to be bipartisan about, it's about national security. It's about securing our homeland. And part and parcel of securing our homeland is having a secure border. One element of that, in addition to instituting consequences like the Migrant Protection Protocol, like something I proposed with the the senator from Arizona, Senator Sinema. Operation Safe Return. There has to be a consequence to reduce or stop this flow. But we also need barriers. Technology alone is not going to work. We can't hire enough Border Patrol agents. They are already being dispirited. We're going to have a hard time hiring enough people just to come up to the quota levels we want to hire. We can't do the personnel, can't do the technology. We need the fence. We've bought and paid for it. Let's construct it. With that, Mr. President, I'll yield the floor.